Hey guys, today I want to give you 5 accountability questions that you can use with your men's group in a one-on-one mentoring relationship. You can even use them, fathers, with your teenage sons. These are great questions to just go over once a month, maybe once a quarter, just as often as you need it. Now, as we're talking today about accountability questions, before we even jump into all 5 of these, I want to show you in Scripture where I think this really comes from. Paul wrote in Galatians chapter 6, "Dear brothers, if another believer is overcome by some sin, you who are godly should gently and humbly help that person back onto the right path, and be careful not to fall into the same temptation yourself. Share each other's burdens, and in this way obey the law of Christ. If you think you're too important to help someone, you're only fooling yourself. You're not that important." So I know for a lot of guys, they're uncomfortable talking with other guys about their stuff. But man, it's really important that we share each other's burdens. That's what Paul is saying here. He says, look, the law of Christ says this: love God, love your neighbor as yourself. If you really want to love your neighbor as yourself, especially in today's society, men, get into an accountability relationship with 1 or 2 other guys that you can trust and share your burdens with one another. With that in mind, here's the first accountability question. This is spiritual. Describe a typical day this week in terms of your spiritual disciplines. On a scale of 1 to 5, how connected do you feel to God? Now, I'm a big fan of these scaling questions because, man, we don't always know how to talk about stuff. So it might be helpful for you to just put a number on it. You know, I feel like I'm a 1 this week, or I'm a 5 this week, or I'm a 3 this week. You know, it's really important as we get into some of these other questions that the first one is about your connection to God. Jesus said, if we stay connected to Him, then we will bear much fruit. So it's really important to ask this first question spiritually: how connected to God have you been? Then you can move on to the second question, and that one is relational. Describe an unhealthy or selfish interaction that you had this week. How should you have handled it? Now notice, I'm assuming that you did have an unhealthy interaction or a selfish interaction because you're a human being. You're a guy. If you can't think of one, then think a little bit harder. That's the relational question. And the third one is an emotional question. I know we men don't like to talk about our emotions, but do it. Name one emotion that impacted your week. Maybe it was anger, maybe it was anxiety, maybe it was joy. And how did you try to handle it internally? Now, again, guys, I know it's hard for a lot of us to talk about our emotions, but it's actually really important for us to become more and more self-aware, to become emotionally healthy Christians. One of the ways to do that is to start talking about it with the men in our lives that we trust. We can dig into it and maybe uncover some stuff that's going to be helpful for the rest of our lives. Question number 4, you guessed it, is sexual. Describe a sexual temptation you had this week. On a scale of 1 to 5, how well did you respond to it? Now again, notice I'm making an assumption here that you had a sexual temptation this week. Let's not pretend that we didn't. Even Jesus was tempted in every way. So temptation's not the problem. The problem is how you handle it. So men, if we start talking about this in a healthy way with our men's group or with our mentor, with some people that we can trust, then pretty soon that temptation can start getting dealt with. Because again, the temptation's not the problem. It's how you handled it. So start talking about it, and soon enough, you might start having victory over it. And the last question is sort of a catch-all. It's a general question. Is there anything else you need to talk or pray about this week that has been a burden on you? Maybe it's marital, maybe it's financial, or some addiction that you're dealing with. Use this last question to talk about anything else that you need to maybe handle in that accountability setting. And again, I know for some of you guys, it might be really hard. It might be really awkward to talk about these sorts of things, especially the first time. But my challenge to you is talk about these accountability questions every month or every quarter. Return to this topic, and every time you do it, you'll get just a little bit better at it.